Rocco is on the worst four-game stretch of his career and failed to get it done this last weekend again against Arizona State and has everyone wondering, is it time to move on to Alex Manske? I'm here to tell you no, but I'm also here to tell you why.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, Cyclone fans, and welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Nick Marvitz. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. A lot we got to cover today. The first thing is the question of the quarterback position. There is a lot of heat on Rocco right now after 4 straight losses, and a lot of people are wondering, do we just move on? Do we play Manske and see what we have in the chamber? I'm here to tell you no, but I'm going to break down why in the first segment. Then, in the second segment, I went back and took a look at every single play in the Arizona State-Iowa State game. I found some trends. All right, I'm here to notify you of what I found, and I'm going to give you my opinion on that as well in the second segment. And then finally, a lot of conversation. Honestly, valid, but a lot of conversation around should we move on from John Heacock? And I'll answer that question as well in the third segment, all right? So don't go anywhere. It's a jam-packed show. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. First order of business we've got to tackle today. Should Iowa State move on from Rocco Becht and hand the reins to Alex Manske? I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you no. Okay, I've got 3 major reasons why I think that that's the case. Okay, and this is just my opinion. All right, if you believe Iowa State is better off with Manske, at quarterback as the starter, I'm not going to tell you that you're necessarily wrong. Okay, I'm just telling you why I think Rocco Becht is still the best play moving forward. And if we have time, there's even a chance that I will actually give the other side of the coin, why I could see the other side of it. But let's start with what I actually think. First things first, grass isn't always greener, okay? Rocco Becht has not played his best over the last 4 games. I pulled up the stats for his career, did the conditional formatting, and the last 4 games are basically, it's just a sea of red, all right? We can all agree he has not played well basically since the Arizona game, all right? And these 4 straight losses, Rocco Becht hasn't figured it out. And so you would obviously, and this is a totally rational train of thought in some aspect, this is rational to think, well, if we change something, something's got to change. And we're going to talk about that. It's literally the second point on this. It says change brings change. It doesn't guarantee change for the better though, right? We have to keep that in mind. That's something that I think a lot of Iowa State fans, we over the last few years, maybe the last 5 years, I would say, the second half of Matt Campbell's coaching, tenure here at Iowa State, the standard has been raised, and I think we can all agree on that, right? We're no longer going into seasons hoping to get to 6 wins. Now, at this point in the season, I think it's valid to hope to get to 6 wins because the wheels seem to have fallen off. But going into the season, there was legitimate hopes of a Big 12 title, and I was in the same boat. I might have been the loudest one banging that drum. We should bring home a Big 12 title. This is the season to do it. Obviously, in the game last year, this is the year that we could do it. And that was not the case, 10 years ago. So on some level, you have to realize that Iowa State's in a better spot now than they have been. And every change isn't always going to result in a better team, a better situation, right? A better result. That's my first point. Rocco is still a good quarterback. He's having a rough stretch. Yeah, he is. But I'm trusting the process here. And I believe, Manske has time to develop. He could be a great quarterback. He could be the best quarterback that Iowa State has ever seen. There is a chance of that. But right now, I think Rocco still has it, right? And the change doesn't necessarily mean that it will automatically be good. So we're just keeping that in mind. That's my first point. Second point, I genuinely believe that there is a bit of a scheme mismatch here. I don't know exactly what it is. I can't put my finger on it. But I think that the scheme is holding Rocco back just a little bit. And part of the reason, and this is kind of the third point that I'm getting at here, but part of the reason is we don't have Higgins and Knoll anymore. All right, going into the season, that was a major point for anyone who talked Iowa State football. Anyone across any major media, any small media, any guy who picked up a microphone for the first time, if they talked about Iowa State football, the first thing out of their mouth was, Well, they're missing their 2 pro wide receivers who were both picked up by the Texans in the draft. We'll see how that pans out for them. Totally valid. Totally a valid, astute observation, I would say. I just don't know if maybe Mauser forgot that. It seems like the scheme hasn't really updated, even with the major change at wide receiver. And look, I'm not a huge fan of the way that Mauser calls this offense. I think he does good. I think he's not doing great, right? If that makes sense. I'm not necessarily a hater, but I'm not a huge fan. And so I'm okay with saying, I don't love the sprint out. Why are we running the sprint out? I believe it was against, wasn't Cincinnati and it wasn't Colorado. I think it was BYU. We ran a sprint out to the short side of the field, which was the left side of the field. So he's got to throw kind of like a across the body ball. Why are we running that play? Specific plays I don't love from Taylor Mauser. And then we'll have stretches of the game where I don't know if I covered this specifically against Arizona State, but I noticed that, yes, Arizona State did not blitz a ton. There was they got to Rocco a few times, but there were a lot of plays where he had time to wait and make reads in the pocket. And from my observation this season, Rocco has been the best when it is a quick grab the ball, get it out. Get the ball out in under 2 seconds, maybe 2.5. That's when he seems to operate his best. So I am surprised when we go drives of Iowa State letting plays develop into these 3, 4, 5-second situations. That doesn't mean that you can't have those plays, because how else do you get chunk plays? Like, I understand sometimes you got to take a shot over the top, and those plays take longer to develop. But not playing to Rocco's strengths, I don't know. I'm just saying I don't think the scheme is a perfect fit right now. I think it could be tinkered with. I think it could be tweaked where Rocco could see more success in the way that this Iowa State offense is ran. And my third major point here is that wide receivers are just flat out dropping balls. And we've talked about this all season long. And like I said, this is kind of like the same with the Higgins and Knoll conversation. It's just not from the scheme standpoint. The actual talent out at wide receiver is not what it used to be. Now, you're going to have people who say Rocco is nothing without Higgins and Knoll. I don't think that's true. I think he just needs the wide receivers he's throwing to actually catch the ball. Rocco can only do so much. He can only put the ball in the spot the wide receiver needs to catch it. The wide receivers just aren't always doing that. Okay. Now, before you get your keyboards out, and I can already hear the typing, I am not saying that Rocco has been perfect this season. Rocco has been far from perfect these last 4 games. Just flat out has not been good. Okay. I believe this is QBR that I have here, just straight red on the conditional formatting, right? Like that, it just hasn't been great. Okay. And a lot of his passes, to be quite honest, have been inaccurate, right? And he's throwing receivers into trouble. I understand that, but not every pass is terrible. And I imagine on some level, he's doing almost too much because he feels he has to. He feels like that's what it takes for this team to see success, right? And this has happened at the pro level. I mean, name the quarterback that first comes to your mind when you think of doing too much, just because it feels like if they don't do too much, the offense doesn't have anything going for them. I'm not saying that's the case for Iowa State. Honestly, I think their run game needs to be used more. I mean, we'll talk about that here in the second segment, but I wonder if that's part of what's going on here. Rocco's playing just outside of his limits because he feels if he doesn't, this team just won't see success. I don't think Iowa State needs to move on from Rocco to wrap this all up in a bow. I just don't think the grass is always greener. I think you have to ride it out. He's still a good quarterback. I think there is a slight scheme mismatch. And I think his wide receivers are letting him down, right? Obviously the silver lining or the other side of the coin would be Manske gets more time in game to develop, gets earlier on in his career a chance to really see some real game action, some snaps. If Rocco's, still got lasting effects from the Cincinnati hit, maybe they let him sit for the rest of the season, yada, yada, yada. Maybe if he's coming back, there's all these extra factors that go into this. It's not as simple as just yes or no. I understand that. But I do think for Matt Campbell, it kind of is a yes or no. I think he's just like, yeah, we're going to play Rocco. He's our guy. And also that's another part of it too, is like if you bench Rocco, even if it's just for the rest of this season, where is his head at? Final point I'll throw in here. I guess this is just a bonus point. If Manske was better, I think they would play Manske. I think they would. There is an element of like some pride to it. You see that much more in the NFL with where we paid this guy. We're going to play him. We picked him first round. We're going to play him. But at the end of the day, if Manske were significantly better than Rocco in practice, day in and day out, I think after 3 losses or 3 straight losses and now 4 straight losses, there would be a conversation where if he's playing better every single day, let's just play him and see what happens. And I don't think that that's happened because we haven't seen Manske do that. We just haven't seen him come into games like that. That's just my opinion. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know at Nick_Marv. Now it's time. This was so painful for me to do today. We have to dive into the statistics that I found when combing through play-by-play, replaying the Arizona State-Iowa State game. It was painful for me. You don't have to go through the same pain, but I am going to bring up the major points coming up right here after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even when you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Me personally, I always miss tip-off. There's just so much going on, so the ability to jump in live makes it so easy. And plus, you can even combine those live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It really keeps every single game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push that you predicted. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So I went back through every single play of the Arizona State-Iowa State game, if you want to call it that. And it was painful. I'm not going to lie to you, because here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, I, Nick Marvitz, want the Cyclones to win every single game and by 1,000,000 points. And believe it or not, they didn't do that against Arizona State. And it was kind of ugly the way that they lost. 19-24, ugly, rainy, cold day. I mean, it just wasn't fun. So going back through every single play, it was kind of like reliving like some sort of terrible nightmare. I'm not even going to lie to you, but I did find some interesting stuff. Very interesting. Basically what I looked at was obviously like down distance, where the ball was at when that play was run, the yards gained or lost. Was it a pass? Was it a run? Obviously completion, first down, yes, no, touchdown, things of that nature. Nothing too crazy here. All right. I am still running this on Google Sheets. So I am semi-limited, and my time is also a part of that. But a couple things that I noticed. Iowa State had 6 plays over 15 yards. You want to talk about like those chunk plays? Iowa State had 6 plays that I categorized as chunk plays, right? A 12-yard run. Yeah, it's pretty chunky, but it's not quite like beef stew chunky, right? Like that's like just not quite enough broth and chicken noodle soup type of chunky. So I went with 15 yards. 4 of those plays were pass plays. 2 of them were run plays, which I actually found to be quite surprising because I felt like the run game was more consistent all day long. And it kind of was, but it was more like one of those steady drips as opposed to boom or bust, which the pass game very much was. The first down distribution for Iowa State went 6 first downs on first down, 8 first downs on second down, 2 first downs on third down, and 1 first down on fourth down. We remember how that went at the end of the game. The 2 third downs were converted from 7 and 8 yards out. And I do have a few other stats, but this is the perfect time to talk right about that third down conversion rate and basically what happened on third down, because I have it right here. Okay. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 third downs. 2 for 15. Pretty ugly. That's not good. That's not going to win you a lot of games. The 2 plays that Iowa State did convert on were a 3rd and 7, where a 7-yard pass was completed from the Iowa State 42, and on a 3rd and 8, where from the Iowa State 27, where a 21-yard pass was completed. Okay, looking at the rest of the third downs, this is ridiculous. 1 run play. Now, I understand you're probably wondering, what were the distances on all those third downs? Valid question. Very astute observation, to use that term twice in one show. Iowa State did struggle, was in a lot of third and medium to longs. And you know this, I know this, is just rehashing over these games, but just for some reference, the only time where Iowa State ran was a 3rd and 2. They did see a 3rd and 3, a 3rd and 1, a 3rd and 2, passed on all of those. But really what I saw here was, yes, they passed a ridiculous number of times. They did not complete a lot of these passes. Iowa State just only of the 4 completions, 2 of them got them first downs, which already obviously not ideal. But of the 14 throws, 4 completions on third down. Did not love to see that. Did not love to see that. And we'll get back to that in a second. A few other things that I noticed. Average of 4.3 yards on pass plays, average of 5.4 on the run plays. In the red zone, relatively even distribution. 9 pass plays to 7 run plays. Red zone defined as inside the 25. Of their first downs, the 9 were runs, 8 were passes. And they had 5 plays from behind the sticks, beyond 10 yards, 3 incomplete passes and 2 complete passes. One of those being a first down. The reason I bring all this up is, we can dive into these stats all day long. I think it's super interesting, personally. If you hate it, let me know in the comments below. All right. I can switch up my strategy here, but I personally love it because it really shows trends that you just don't really notice when you're watching the game. One of them being 14 pass attempts of the 15 third downs. And there are so many other trends that I wanted to talk about, but this was the main one that when I'm talking about, with Taylor Mauser or John Haycock, which we'll talk about in the third segment here, this next segment, there is a lack of adjustment from these coaches. And it's just one of those things where you have to sit back and wonder, what is the reasoning? Why are they going for this? This is what they want. And one of the pass plays was a sack. Obviously, a couple penalties mixed in here. And you have to understand where they're at on the field, which I'm not going to dive into here. But that was my main problem when I broke down these stats. And the lack of, honestly, the lack of run game. I would have liked to have seen them run more than they did, right? And that's just personal preference. But I think that this is almost borderline malpractice. I mean, it's just not good. You just can't. This is not good. And the fact that they're getting into these third and medium or longer is also indicative of what's going on in first and second down, right? I don't have every single drive pulled up right now to tell you if, penalties were a part of it, of specific. Every drive is different, and I understand that. But the way that this offense is being run it's like this team should be better on offense than it is. And I think we can all agree on that. Because I had the realization, I feel like, specifically after this game, we talk about injuries. And I mean, other than the Bramer one injury in this Arizona State game, where is Iowa State injured on offense? For the most part, pretty much healthy. Pretty ridiculously healthy compared to the defense. Now, obviously, there are guys that are banged up and guys that aren't playing at full strength. I understand that. But we don't have 3, wide receivers out for the season. We're not missing our starting quarterback. This offense it's just not getting it done. And Mauser talked about this last week where we're not converting yards into points. And honestly, I think it is play calling on some level, but it's a scheme issue. Like I mentioned in the first segment, something about this Iowa State offensive scheme has to change. It's just not working. Whatever they're sending them out there to do, they're not putting them in the best positions to succeed on offense. Defense is a whole nother animal. And we're going to talk about that coming up right here after this. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, saw some ridiculous deals, and the app made it super simple. All right, I'm about to tell you about my favorite feature by far, the fact that you can see your view from your seat before you buy it. All right, I don't do well with the maps. I don't know what I'm looking at. Like, what does that actually mean? How big of a deal is the second row, the third row, whatever? The view makes it so much easier. I love it. It's honestly faster, cheaper, and less stressful, than any other way that I have bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. After Iowa State's fourth straight loss, there is a lot of noise around this fan base. It's gotten super loud. And I don't know if I've ever heard it this loud, actually. Here at Locked On Cyclones, for our Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There are two camps, of course, as there is with anything, but there is a significant portion of Cyclone fans that are not happy with this team and where they're at. And there are a lot of that group of fans that are calling for changes. And as you know, the board to my left, or to my right, excuse me, says change brings change. And that's true. I do agree with that. And we'll get to exactly what kind of change I'm talking about here. But the change that these folks want is a different defensive coordinator. I'm going to be honest. I don't think that's the play here. Okay. John Haycock is a very good defensive coordinator. Don't get me wrong. It's just that what he's doing right now is maybe outdated. It just isn't working. I think that's the best way to put it. The biggest, and we talked about this yesterday, the biggest thing for me is we went through a whole second half where Arizona State attempted, I think by my count, was 4 passes. 4 passes. 1, 2, 3. Okay, maybe they attempted 5, but a penalty was involved with one of them. Every other play was a run, and we didn't see really much of an adjustment. We really didn't. That's the problem. The scheme aside, which we will get to, we're still not seeing enough adjustment from these coaches. You just make a quick change, and you see how that changes things, and then you will go from there. It feels like in this one, Iowa State just didn't want to make a change. They were okay with where they were at, especially defensively, because like I said, they gave up 127 yards outside of one play in the second half. And I saw the comment that was like, you're blaming this on the second half defense? No, I'm not. I am saying that we should probably see some adjustments. I am not blaming this on the second half. It is actually, of all of the things that I've said today, that is the most reasonable thing. Like to not make any adjustments, because you really were one blown tackle away from having a 127-yard allowed second half defense, which is good. It's not great, and I think that they probably could have been better, especially when you consider that Arizona State essentially ran one thing the entire second half. But at the end of the day, if you make a change and it blows up in your face, you could have had this, but you ended up with this. I can see that conversation happening too. So I'm not going to get on John Haycock too hard for the second half, although I am making the point that you probably should have made a few adjustments to shut down what Arizona State was doing, but they were kind of already stopping it. The biggest thing I've got here is the defense that Iowa State is running, I just don't think is successful, and I don't think it's successful in the current college football landscape. That's the problem. I don't think that means you need to fire John Haycock. That's not what I'm saying. I think that John Haycock needs to go back to the drawing board for next season or for next week and decide what is the new way that Iowa State's defense is going to run. Is it going to be a 4-man front? Is it going to be, some sort of 3-man front with 2 edge linebackers, whatever. I'm not a defensive coordinator. I know significantly less even about defense than I do offense. I understand how defense works. I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. That's why I'm not calling specifically why I'm not calling for his job either, because I don't know what the best answer is, but he's the DC. He's the one who can get in there with the whiteboard, the X's and the O's, and say, all right, when we're dropping 8, the opponent's, 3rd and long pass success rate is ridiculously high. What's the best course of action here? What's the best change that we can make to effectively make this defense effective? The other side of this, which I haven't gotten to yet, and I'm sure there's already a few of you that have made this comment, which if you made it, good for you. I appreciate the comment, but we are not our strongest on defense right now. We do not have all of the guys out there running around that we should. So you got to give Haycock the benefit of the doubt in some aspect. In some regard, you have to understand that this defense is not really up to Big 12 standards, right? And it's not that these players are bad. These players can't get it done. They're just too young, too inexperienced, asked to do too much. They're very thin at, as far as depth goes across the defense. And we are seeing guys make huge plays, Cooper Ebel was unbelievable. Caleb Bacon was unbelievable against Arizona State, right? We still have top-end talent. It's just not enough across the entire defense to be successful. And while I do think that John Haycock is the guy that should be taxed with the responsibility of changing the defense to whatever you have out there, at the same time, at some point, it doesn't really matter what you have them do. The defense is going to struggle. It just is. At some point, they're really, really injured on defense. And it's a tall task to ask them to do much other than what they are already doing. And that's what I've talked about earlier. A couple weeks now I've been saying this. This offense needs to go out and score 40 points a game if they want to win games. And we haven't seen the offensive adjustments necessary for the 40-point games to start showing up every week. But I also I don't expect this defense to hold everyone to 10 points. They are so beat up. It's just they don't have the personnel for it. You're going to get a few lucky breaks. You're going to, and especially against Arizona State, you're going to win turnover battles. Like every now and then, you're going to give the offense the help it needs. The defense is going to do more than it's probably capable of every now and then. But not every game can you rely on this defense to hold an opponent to, 200 yards of total offense and 8 points or 9 points, 3 field goals, whatever. Like, it's not always going to happen. This is the Big 12 still playing talented teams every single week. So, yeah, I do, to wrap this all up, I think John Haycock needs to make changes in-game and scheme-wise. I just think we're kind of past the defense he's running. There are plays where it's successful, but it feels like when a team needs to really expose our defense, they know how. And I don't know what it is that's allowing them to do that, but they know how, and they can get it done, right? They know how to manipulate the way Iowa State is trying to defend them. When it really comes down to it, they can do something that they need to do. I don't love that. I feel like we should maybe address that. But at the same time, calling for Haycock's job right now just doesn't make sense to me. He's got too much injured especially in the secondary, but in this defense, he's just way too thin as far as actual personnel goes. And then you consider the fact that he still is. It's not like we're throwing out some completely terrible defense. Like I talked about, 127 yards aside from the 88-yard run. If you include that, Arizona State had, what would that be? 130 basically plus basically 90. So 220. Is that basically the math there? Gosh, I'm trying to do speaking, not math, but around 220 and a touchdown in the second half. That's kind of today's college football of total offense, 220. I understand there are nuances, and I have brought those up, but it's hard to do it every single time. So the point is 220 and a touchdown in the second half. Whatever it was specifically number-wise, I don't have that. I'm not that fast with the numbers, but he is still doing something. He's not letting them score every drive. And we haven't even talked about Iowa State scores 4 plays, 88 yards. That's our response on defense. Haycock had talked about that. We need to be better after we score touchdowns. Yeah, that was ugly. That was like the prime example. That can't happen. I've gotten comments talking about like, you're being too negative on this team. It's just because the expectations were higher for this team. And I think that they can be moving forward. These coaches need to do something, though. They need to make a change. They need to make an adjustment because, as it says in the box over here, change brings change. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And we're on four-game skid here. So I would imagine we kind of need to change something, right? If you're winning every game by 60 points, maybe don't change anything. Whoa, if it ain't broke, go fix it, right? Just leave it how it is. But unfortunately, right now, I need to see a change. That's just me. This team, especially on offense, specifically, I guess, on offense, it should be better than it is, than what we're seeing. And I'm not calling for Rocco, calling for maybe something scheme-wise specifically, because I just answered the question, should we move on to Manske? And I don't think so. But what do you think? Should we move on from Haycock? Should we move on from Mauser? Should we move on from Rocco? Very different tone to this time of the year as opposed to last season, right? Keep that in mind, where Iowa State is at, where we've been. All worth at least thinking about here today at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me at Nick_Marv on Twitter. Shoot your thoughts over there as well. I read all of them. Thank you guys so much for listening till this point in the episode. You are the best. Hit that subscribe button. Completely free. Helps us prove it's in a Cyclone state. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.